Hi, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be joined by Nicolle Vasquez Del Favero. She's an attorney and the incoming president of the MSJDN network. Congratulations,
Thank you very much. President-elect, but we're in the
President-elect.
pipeline.
This is fantastic. Um, so before we start, I always ask everyone to tell us a little bit about their military spouse journey, if you would, so that people kind of understand where you're coming from.
Sure. So I am Nicole, as Sue said. I am originally from Miami. I met my husband at the University of Florida. Go Gators. So we are college sweethearts. When we graduated college, we decided that we wanted to stay together. So I went to Boston to law school, and he went to the Marine Corps, where he did OCS and IOC and or infantry officer course before he got stationed at Camp Pendleton. So we were on the same coast for about a year, my first year of law school, which was nice. I would see him once a month. And then he moved cross country, and we started our 5 years of long distance, or geo-baching, as we lovingly say in the military. Um, so my husband was stationed at Pendleton, deployed twice, once to Japan, once on a Marine Expeditionary Unit on a ship. During that time, I graduated law school in Boston and actually moved to Hawaii. I was a Skadden Fellow, which is a public interest fellowship for 2 years. So I chose to move to Hawaii for 2 years. I represented victims of domestic violence affiliated with the military. And then my husband finally proposed after many, many years of being together. And I followed him out to Norfolk, Virginia, which is where we landed and are still in the area here almost 10 years later. So that's the quick and dirty of it.
Well, you've had quite the non-traditional career path. I mean, how do you even navigate that? Like if I think for other people who graduate from college or graduate from law school, there's a path, right? There's internships and there's places, but like you've had to pivot several times. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of help did you have mapping your career path?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I think I remember being in law school and thinking, well, I'm in love with a Marine that I'm likely going to marry. What does this mean for my career? Because traditionally, like you said, lawyers will go to law school and usually settle down in the state where they've taken the bar. That could be where they've attended school pretty frequently. Or I think now more so, we're more of a transient society. So people will go to law school in one place but settle down where they take the bar. And I knew I wasn't going to live in Hawaii forever. So it was definitely an interesting career choice. I'm grateful that I did it, but it made things a little bit harder when I was then, at my husband's whim of his career and had to move where he was going to move. And I didn't know that that was going to be Virginia. So I was a Hawaii barred attorney in the state of Virginia. And when I landed here, things just got really difficult for me, honestly. I looked for a network. I found MSJDN, which is the Military Spouse JD Network, which is a bar association for military spouse attorneys, and put some feelers out there. But I think also kind of tried to figure out a path for myself, and so that led to me taking a job where I worked as a paralegal, even though I'd had 2 years of pretty heavy courtroom experience in Hawaii. So I was underemployed, and then I was unemployed when that job just wasn't a good fit for me. And then I took a position as a contracted attorney, actually with some other military spouse attorneys that were also in the area. And that was also really interesting because while I was grateful to even be working as an attorney doing contracted work, it was very clear from the firm that, like, you are not one of us. You don't belong here. You're here momentarily, so we're not going to really get to know you or invest in you. But during that time, I had actually met another military spouse by happenstance through a friend who worked for the federal government, and she got me into the career that I have had for almost the past decade, which is as a federal government attorney. And I'm incredibly grateful to that spouse for even showing me that there was a way, because I think at one point I thought, well, attorneys in the military or for the federal government must be JAG or DOJ.
Right.
And when I think of DOJ, I think of Washington, D.C., or like bigger cities, not necessarily Southeast Virginia. So it was through word of mouth by another military spouse attorney that I landed where I landed and got through the underemployment and unemployment stages of my career.
And that's really interesting that you say that about how it was another military spouse who helped get you to where you are right now because one of our summits way back when I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, we talked about it and we had a panel about federal employment and they were saying that it's just as important to network in the federal government
Yes.
as it is anywhere else. And people are like, what? That seems so counterintuitive because everything's done through interviews and, like it's so transparent, the process. And they're like, yeah, it's transparent. But sometimes, the job's not listed for that long or you don't know the jobs are available. And so they're like, it's just as valuable for federal employees to network as it is for anybody else. I mean, have you found that to be the case?
Absolutely. So I had seen other people like get into the federal government. I had never thought of it for attorneys or even military spouses, because we move so often. And so when I looked into it, I remember seeing that the agency I work for primarily does acquisition work, so government contracts, or we call it civilian personnel law, which is just a fancy way of saying employment law for the
Right.
government. And I'm like, well, I don't really have experience in either of these things based on what I was practicing before. And I think if I had just come across the post myself or on USA Jobs, I probably wouldn't have applied thinking I wasn't qualified. And I learned very quickly that, like, you can't really learn government acquisition unless you're actually doing it. And so, knowing that and knowing that they're just looking for someone that's open to learn and you can really create a career in this area, I applied and I was really lucky, got the first position that I applied for and got my foot in the door as a federal attorney, which has been incredibly beneficial to me. It's completely a pivot, like you mentioned. It is not something I ever saw myself doing in law school. But I'm really grateful that I've been able to continue a career while my husband has gone from active duty to now a reservist. So it's been interesting.
No, that's really cool that you say that and that we have not talked to many military spouse attorneys who work for the federal government. So I'm going to take advantage and I'm just going to ask you, what are the benefits of working for the federal government as a military spouse attorney? I mean, is it like the retirement savings, the flexibility? What's the appeal?
Yeah, so I think initially when I got in almost 10 years ago, the flexibility was incredibly helpful. I was able to benefit from parental leave for my two children, so that was so wonderful to be able to have like 3 months of paid leave off with both of them. Um, the pay is not commensurate with the private practice, but I think you trade that off with work-life balance.
Mhm.
Previously, I had worked on a hybrid schedule, which was great. Um, I That has kind of gone away with the return to work mandates that we've seen. I am grateful, though, that the federal government has done a lot in the way of making sure that military spouses that were on remote work can keep their positions, which I think is really thanks to the advocacy efforts of other military spouses in the federal government. So, like you said, having that network and being able to advocate for each other is incredibly helpful. Um, Touching on flexibility, I think the one thing that I will say is that we're still trying to figure out telework and like regular telework for military spouses. So I think what we've seen in the news a lot as federal government employees that are military spouses is that there is a thought process that a lot of us are remote. And that is true. There are a lot of military spouses that benefit from remote work, which is why I think federal work in this military lifestyle is definitely like a gold standard. But there are also a lot of us, especially the attorneys I find, that are stationed where we work, right? So it's sometimes very hard to be an attorney. That is remote completely. In my experience, most of the military spouses that I know in my network that are also federal employees are stationed where they work. So they go on to base frequently, or we're on a traditional hybrid schedule that has since changed. And I think the issue with that is when we have spouses that deploy, we're manning the home front by ourselves. The lack of flexibility and the inability to have situational telework or even that hybrid schedule that we used to have has been a little bit difficult to navigate, especially given like the childcare issues that a lot of us face. But I do think that we're starting to see a changing tide. So I'm optimistic that as the dust kind of settles, that we'll go back to the federal government being this like flexibility gold standard and having this appreciation for military spouses that has, for the majority of my career, been the situation.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems like every time the pendulum swings, it does swing back. So hopefully
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just temporary. So for those military spouses who are just starting out, because everybody's always curious about portability, like how portable is this career choice? How portable is a career in the legal field?
Yeah, so that is something that like fuels my passion fire a lot with the work that I do with MSJDN. So for the last 4 years, I served as their state licensing director. When I first found the organization, when I moved to Virginia in like 2016, we had quite a few states on the books that had military spouse licensing accommodations, which was great because again, traditionally with legal practice, you don't think of it as moving state to state. But I think with the rise of the UBE, the Universal Bar Exam, which quite a few states have adopted, and with the work that we've done through MSJDN, we now have 44 states that have military spouse licensing accommodations. So if you are moving to, or if you've gotten orders to a new state and you're moving with your service member, make sure to look at the bar of that state and see if there is a military spouse licensing provision. Or you can go to MSJDN's website and see if one exists there and what the provision looks like. So Virginia has a particularly interesting one, which I've been working on for quite a while now. It requires supervision for the duration of the time that you are with the bar, which wouldn't necessarily be problematic because I think inherently the practice of law is like a supervised practice. You usually have a partner or a senior counsel or someone that is supervising you if you're younger in practice. But chaperoning you to court as a barred attorney is not something we traditionally see. It's usually reserved for like third year law students. So it's something we're working to overcome. There's been a change recently in the FY25 NDAA that removed the practice of law from the Military
Mm.
Spouse Licensing Relief Act, which previously we were the only licensure practice that was excluded from that. So we're seeing some really positive changes, which I think will make the practice of law even more transferable for military spouse attorneys, which I'm incredibly grateful for because we really want to like pay it forward. Like the military spouse attorneys that have been here for a while, the ones that started MSJDN in 2011, like this is what we want to see. We want to ensure that like other spouses are not going through the struggles that we've had to go through because honestly, we want our careers too. We worked really hard in school and like we are completely supportive of our spouses, but our spouses are also pretty supportive of us. You know, they say you know who you marry in the military, but I think our service members are equally aware of who they married as well. So I think when you help the military family all around, we know, I don't even think we know based on studies and research that it makes for a more productive military community.
Well, it removes the barriers to the service member staying, and
Absolutely.
because we always say that, a military spouse employment is key in national security because we don't have people beating down our doors to join the military. So we
Right.
need the best and the brightest to continue to choose to serve and to stay in. And we don't think that a service member should ever have to choose between serving their country and doing what's best for their family. So if we can like remove that barrier for military spouses to be able to work if they want to work, I mean,
Why wouldn't we?
why
Right?
wouldn't we? Like we're doing the good work. I mean,
Yes.
it's
And
not
I'm
it's
oh,
not a nice to do thing. It's an imperative.
yeah, absolutely. And I think time and time again, like we are seeing a lot more service members that are supportive of their spouses' careers. I will say, like, I came around in a time where um when my husband was like a very junior officer in the Marine Corps, I had been told by more senior officers, like, if we wanted your husband to have a wife, we would have issued one in his sea bag. Especially when they found out when I was doing domestic violence work, which to my response was, don't we want the best and the brightest? We should not be having service members that are hurting their spouses. That's not the best. So to be able to see that trajectory or even to stop hearing, which I'm grateful I've stopped hearing, you can just work when your service member retires. Like That's a really long time from now. That's a big chunk of my life that I would really like to be committing to my hopes and dreams as well, and why can't I do that along my service
And
member?
it's quite arrogant for people to say that because there's a recognition in America that most families require two salaries to
Absolutely.
thrive. But that doesn't carry over to the military for some reason. Like Americans inherently understand that it takes two salaries to thrive, but military families seem to be different for some reason, where we're expected to like just make do with one salary. And, if you find an opportunity to work, great, take it.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like, why is it any less important for us? Because we promote financial security for military families, and like they just stop short of understanding that this is a key part of financial security. If somebody needs to
absolutely.
bring in a second salary.
Oh my gosh, especially with, like, mortgage rates and
Childcare costs,
2
yeah,
I have 2 kids under 4, and, like, childcare costs are insane, so I don't know how you expect me to not work.
yeah.
So yes, incredibly imperative to support us.
No, and we are, like preaching to the choir clearly, and on the same page here and on the same side in terms of advocacy. So I appreciate the work you're going to do. I appreciate the work you've done, but I appreciate the work you're about to do as the president-elect of MSJDN.
Thank you.
So in closing, I thought I was just ask you because you touched on the fact that you geo-batch. And I always tell spouses, because we don't talk about this enough, when they're thinking about making that decision to geo-batch, and other people look at people who have great careers and like, oh, you're so lucky that you've had like, you had this great opportunity come. And I'm like, they're not lucky. They made choices. Like at some point they were geo-batching, they decided to not marry right away, or they
Mhm.
delayed things. These are very deliberate choices. And so when you geobatch, what was that decision like? That couldn't have been easy. And would you do anything different? Is there anything that you'd want other people to know who are thinking about it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think every single person has a different experience geobaching. I think there is absolutely an emotional toll that comes from it. It's really hard to not be with the person with your spouse. At the time, my husband was my boyfriend. We had been together for so long, though, like we were very serious. We knew what we were going to do. We just waited to get married until we were more financially stable because the economy, So I think for me, I am incredibly grateful for my husband's support because when I graduated law school, I was getting ready to move out to California with him. And I had been given this really great opportunity with this very prestigious fellowship that just happened to be in Hawaii. And, I remember talking to him when I applied for it, and he was like, well, aren't we going to be together? But, still apply and see what happens. And I said, there's no way I'm going to get this. It's fine. I just want to see. And when I got it, we had almost flipped roles where I said, I really want to be with you, but I also want my career. And he said, this isn't a question. You have worked so hard. You need to do this. And I think I'm so grateful for him. I think it's one of the reasons that, I married my person, my service member. But I think for me, I was 25 years old, starting my legal career. And I really loved the opportunity looking back on that to be able to do that on my own by myself, while he was creating his own career as a junior officer at the time on his own by himself. We were completely supportive of each other and completely supportive in wanting to fulfill these ambitions that we had both worked incredibly hard for. So when I got to follow him to Norfolk, there was no feeling of resentment. If anything, it was like a feeling of pride of, oh my God, I did this. I moved to this island by myself. I started my legal career. I did it. And now we can truly like be together. You've created your career too, and this is your B billet. Like we were both growing, and not only did we grow professionally, but I think we grew as individuals in a way that like I would have never gotten if I had been attached to someone from so young. So I am personally very grateful for the opportunity to geobatch, both what it did for me professionally and like how I grew personally. And I think what made us a stronger couple is that we grew together. And had we not, it would have been a really good realization that like maybe we just outgrew each other, but we didn't. So I'm grateful.
Worked out. No, I love that. No, so bottom line, people just need to take everything into consideration and
Yes.
communicate.
Do what feels right for you. I mean, we go through such long deployments. We go through bouts of, no communication. And so in that way, I think this military life really does something to improve our communication skills. And I always love to say, if you really want to get something done, let a military spouse do it. And I do think it's just like the nature of what we are thrown into and how we have to hold down the home front, but also like make our relationships function with our partners. And so I think that that experience was good for me, and I completely understand when spouses say it was hard, I would never do it again, or I would make different choices. I completely understand that as well. But for myself, I think it was helpful. So just do what feels right for you. And when people question you, nobody knows what your situation is. So
Exactly.
go into it open-heartedly and have no regrets. Do what feels right for you, because you also worked really hard in your career path.
No, I love it, and, I respect your husband so much. I don't even know him, and I'm so proud of him. But
He's a
that's
keeper. I'll
awesome.
keep him around, I think.
I'm so proud of him, and I don't even know him. But thank you so much, and thank you for answering our questions. And if you guys have questions for Nicolle, just put them in the comments, and we'll make sure she gets them, and then she can answer them that way. But thank you for joining us, and thank you to USAA for making these conversations possible. We hope you'll be back here next week to hear another inspirational story. Bye, guys.
Thank you.